Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Tech Woke Podcast. I am your host, Christopher Okpala, Information System Security Officer inside the GovTech space. And on today's podcast, we're going to have a very great guest. His name is Jay Mellon. Yeah, he created a company called AtNetPlus Incorporated. He also is an IT specialist that worked for IBM and a lot of big companies. And he created his own company to be doing well for a long time. And without further ado, Jay Mellon, welcome to the live.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the live. I know we had some good conversations, so I'm just happy that you was able to come on here and give a little bit of your time. And I know you're in Ohio. Is it raining? Is it raining down there?
Not right now, but it looks like it's about ready to any minute. So it's the way it goes here.
Yeah. So hey, we in the DMV. It's hot, cold. It could be different weathers, but hey, we're just gonna have to deal with it unless you're going overseas or going on vacation somewhere.
True.
Yeah. So throughout our conversations, and also to the audience, can you kind of introduce yourself to kind of, if I missed anything, just kind of introduce the audience?
Sure. Yeah, you did a great job. I'll just, again, my name is Jay Mellon, and my company is AtNetPlus. I'm a co-founder and CEO. We're based in Stowe, Ohio, which is in the Cleveland area, servicing all of Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, including Columbus and Cincinnati, Ohio. And we're excited that we just opened a new office in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina as well.
Oh, congratulations to you. Now you're doing big things. So congrats on everything you've been doing. So Jay, and also to the audience, if you're on the live or you're coming on the live, just make sure you say something. Make sure you like on YouTube. Make sure you have any comments. And if you say something, just say hi. And then also too, if you have any questions for Jay, just make sure you put something down and we make sure that he gets to reply to it. So Jay, tell me about your early days in tech. I know tell me about when you first got into tech. How did you get into tech? And what kept you in the space for so long?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm from North Dakota originally, and I was going to college at North Dakota State University in Fargo, studying construction management, and always had an interest in that. I was actually a carpenter, early in my days, and thought that's the direction I was going. And then a friend of mine in college, his mother was a recruiter for a temp agency, and she begged him to find any friends of his that had a computer. And I happened to have a computer on my desk, and he asked if I'd be willing to do a temp job. Well, that temp job ended up being doing a rollout of Windows 95 to a hospital system nationwide through IBM. So the hospital hired IBM to roll out Windows 95, and they just needed people to literally unbox computers, put them on desks, and plug them in. So that's what I did, and it was supposed to be a temporary assignment. That first project went well. They invited me back for another one. They invited me back for another one. Pretty soon they had me flying all over the country, and before I knew it, I got offered a full-time job. And so I had a decision to make. I could stay in school, or I could take this opportunity that was in front of me. And I've always loved technology. I was afraid to do it for a living because I was afraid I would get bored with it if it was my everyday. But I found doing it actually didn't dampen my enthusiasm. It actually increased it. So I thought about it, decided to drop out of college, and took the opportunity with IBM. And very quickly they were sending me all over the country to large corporate accounts, providing IT services to those environments.
Man, that's amazing. Because even with myself, when I first got into tech, I just was like, okay, I just want to do tech because it just paid me. To be honest with you, it paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
But eventually it became something like fixing things. It's just something that hits you when you fix something.
Yeah.
Or if something's been messing up for a long time, you fixed it. So tech
There's
is
something satisfying.
Yeah.
And I won't deny the money's not bad either. I mean, I part of my thought process was, do I drop out of college? Should I take this job opportunity? I mean, what they offered me to start, was more than I was expecting to earn once I got my degree, right? So it's like, well, I could just get a jump start on this and maybe not have as many student loans. So, certainly the money is not irrelevant, right?
Yes, smart man. Nah, that's smart man. And just a reminder for the audience, if you do have any questions, just make sure you have it in the comments. Okay, so like, and also too, as you're working for IBM, you're kind of seeing like IBM is making a lot of money. Like, for
Hmm.
example, you're seeing these, and I just want to make sure that the audience understands like IBM has a contract, I guess, with the hospitals to install the software, and you're seeing that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so the part that I was in was called IBM Global Services. So a lot of people know IBM for the mainframe computers, desktop computers, and such. These days, a lot of AI technology and services. But back then, IBM Global Services was essentially their consulting part of the business. And I think at the time I was there, it was north of 100,000 employees. It was a
Oh,
big
wow.
organization. And so they had a great reputation in the industry, and essentially a lot of large corporations would outsource their IT departments, and basically instead of running internal IT, outsource it to IBM, which is funny because essentially, that's a similar model to what my business does today. There's some nuanced differences. So um, what brought me to Ohio actually was while working for IBM, I got a call from my boss one day, and he's like, "Hey, I need you in Akron, Ohio, for a week." And I'm like, what for? Where's Akron? I didn't even know where Akron was. And he's like, the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, we have that contract, and one of the guys on the account is going on vacation for a couple of weeks, so we need somebody to cover for him. So I flew out here and got a hotel room, stayed for a couple of weeks. That guy came back from vacation, and they're like, well, we have this other need over here on this account. And next thing I know, I was in a hotel room for 8 months straight on this account, and I really fell in love with the area, fell in love with the people, and said, you know what, there's a permanent opportunity on this account at Goodyear. Why don't you move me out here? And so then being on the Goodyear Tire and Rubber account ended up being kind of a more of a stable position compared to me just going from account to account over time.
Now that's amazing. I've been to Ohio one time. I think I've been to Cincinnati. I've been to Cincinnati, Ohio, but not, Ohio's a very chill spot. This is when I was playing sports. My team, I got invited to a school to play on ESPN. So
Oh,
Ohio's.
cool.
I never been to Akron. Akron, I think is where LeBron from, right?
Absolutely. LeBron's big here. Yeah, he's been great for the community. He's just a solid guy all around.
No, I love that. I
Absolutely.
love to hear that. So like again, you're a young kid at the time. You're fresh
Yeah,
out of
I was
school.
20 years old when I started with IBM, and 23 when we started our company.
So what made dang 23? Whew,
I know. Too young to know any
23?
better. Yeah.
Oh man, what? So I'm just curious because I'm thinking about myself as a 23-year-old.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was immature. I like to go have fun, go out. What
Sure.
makes you as a 23-year-old say, "Hey, I want to start a business," and kind of break down that story?
Yeah. Well, so working on that account, get to know some of the other guys that also worked for IBM on that account. And, we'd have lunch every day and we'd just start talking about things. And, if you know anybody that's worked for IBM over the years, one of the kind of fun things that people say is IBM stands for I've been moved. If you have a long career for IBM, you're going to go to different parts of the country. They're going to move you all over. And in fact, I was originally in the Minneapolis office and they moved me out here. So I experienced a little bit of that. And when I realized that, that contract with Goodyear was probably not going to be forever. And if I wanted to stay with the company, I'd probably have to move somewhere else. I didn't really like that idea. I was starting to get settled down here. I was meeting people and started thinking to myself, if I don't want to move, I've got to start doing something. And so myself and a few of the other guys started talking. We said, well, why don't we do our own thing? And so we did, and my business partner Jim, who's still in the business with me today, we decided to leave with a couple other guys and start the company. And it was one of those things. Was really more of, let's be in control of our own destiny. Let's not be subject to other people's whims, and let's see if we can do it. And then here we are, almost 30 years later.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Like when you say that, a lot of times we have those conversations at companies, and a lot of the times it doesn't even go through, or the person that suggested they end up go doing their own thing. But y'all stuck around for 30 years and y'all still partners. So I just want to commend you on that.
I
Uh,
appreciate that. Yeah, it's like a marriage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta. I know you have your ups and downs. So
Yep. Yeah. Fortunately, my partner's a great guy, so I've been very fortunate in that way.
no, I got you. Shout out to him. So I did want to kind of talk to you about like what is your business? Can you break down like what is your
Yeah.
business and what do you do?
Yeah, so it's evolved over the years, as technology does. That's one of the things I love about the technology space is that it moves fast. If you've got a short attention span, it's a great business to be in. So when we started, it was very similar to what we were doing at IBM. We were providing consulting services, project services for Fortune 500 companies. And so, some of our first clients in the business were names, household names that most people would recognize, and that worked well. However, we quickly, as we picked up more mid-sized clients and some smaller clients, we realized the relationships with those businesses was a lot stronger. When you're part of a Fortune 500 company as a vendor, that's what you are. You're just a vendor. You're just a number, and you're always you know chasing the lowest price, and it just wasn't a kind of a fun place to be relationship wise with the clients. So we really shifted our focus to small and mid-sized clients, and about that time this idea of managed services came about. And so if you're unfamiliar with the idea of managed services, it's essentially where a business will hire a company to either manage all or some of their IT needs. Either not having any internal IT staff, or we also do what's called co-managed, where if a company has an internal staff of, let's say, 1 to 5 people, we will supplement them with either limits on their capacity or maybe limits on their experience. And so we moved in this managed services space, and it really just took off. And the idea of managed services is it's a fixed fee. It's one price per month. It's the same every month, regardless of how much time it takes us. And we just manage everything. And it works well. It's the old model was time and materials, where we bill people for time, and that's a dysfunctional relationship with the client, because at the end of the day, if the client has more problems, we make more money because we're billing more. That's not healthy, right? What we loved about the managed services model is the more stable the client's environment is, the less time we have to put into it, meaning we make more money, the client's happier. It's just a healthier relationship. And so then we moved full into that managed services space, and then over time, as that's grown, cybersecurity has been a big part of it. So from my perspective, you can't properly secure an environment unless you manage it well, and you can't manage an environment well unless you secure it properly. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And then, of course, software development came about is one of the services in the business. So we do write custom software, do workflow automations for clients, and of course now AI is exploding, and we're delivering a lot of AI services to our clients as well. So I know that's a lot, but we do a lot of things.
That's amazing to hear. So for the audience, a lot of people are like myself, either started a business in tech, or senior to mid-level in their career. Just out of curiosity, like when you first started your business, did you just focus on one thing and then everything else grow? Because a lot of people like to do multiple things.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, what we started with was doing projects for companies. So one of the things that I was doing was doing custom scripting. So when I was at IBM, what I learned how to do was install operating systems over a network with a floppy disk. So for example, Windows 95, Windows NT 4.0, which goes way back, write a script where you literally put in a couple floppy disks into the computer, boot it up, walk away, come back 2 hours later, and you've got an operating system installed with all the drivers and everything configured. So I would write those scripts. So that skill set then developed into doing other login script automations, very, very early automations for anybody that's been in the business long. If you know VB script back in the day, a lot of VB script. And we'd have clients that would approach us because they didn't have that skill set in house, and they would engage us to do those projects.
Now I got you. So you're basically saying find a skill set, just focus on that. And then also too, when you started your business, did you have like agreements with your partners? Did you have like an LLC? Like what did you do to get into that space?
Yeah, so we incorporated as an S Corp immediately. So in 1998 is when we filed with the state of Ohio. And one of the other things that we got some really, really good advice from early on is to have a partnership agreement, not a partnership in the legal sense, but essentially a set of agreements that basically say, hey, we like each other and we get along well now. Let's figure out what happens if there's ever a day where we don't like each other, because the time to figure that out is not then, right? Let's figure out how everything works while we get along. Now, fortunately, Jim and I are still working together. He's been a great business partner, and we haven't had to exercise that, but we've had a lot of comfort knowing that's in place if we had ever needed it.
Nah, I hear you. When I started a vending machine business back in the day, I told my business partners at the time, we're good friends. I said we got to get an agreement in case something happens. And
Yeah.
they was fighting and screaming, but I was like, to this day, they said, yeah, that's the best thing we ever did.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, you got to do it up front.
Yeah. Okay. So say for example, I'm just going to use myself as an example, but you can just think of it as like for anybody that's in an IT space. Say I've been working. I'm gonna just give you an example. I work in risk management, right? And I'm trying to figure out how to do consulting, how to give some type of service to somebody. How would you approach that, or how would you monetize your skills? And I know that situation can be different, but how? Just give me kind of a rundown on how you would do that.
Yeah. So, obviously that's evolved a lot over the years as I've learned more and had some really great coaches that have kind of, guided me and given me a lot of their knowledge. And one of the things that I've learned, pardon me, I've got my office is on a motion sensor and it can't see me here. But anyway, one of the things I learned over the years is you have to understand where people have pain, and you have to deliver a solution, product, service, whatever it is that addresses whatever pain that client has. And for the longest time, I thought that if I felt strongly about something, that I could convince the client to feel strongly. In other words, if I had pain around cybersecurity, if I had pain around risk management, and understand being an MSP these days is all about risk management. I thought I could go to a client and convince them that they should have pain around cybersecurity or risk management. But what I had to learn the hard way is pain is not assignable. I can't tell somebody that they have pain around something. They either do or do not have pain in an area. So my job as a service provider is to identify all of the different capabilities that we have, all the services, products, whatever that we can deliver, identify what pains they solve, and then as I'm meeting with prospects, probe for that pain. And if they have pain around a particular area that we can service, then we talk about that. We talk about ways that our solution would address that pain. If they don't have pain, I don't waste any time trying to convince them of it. I move on to the next thing, and I just keep probing for pain until I find something that aligns with what we do. And sometimes you find that the prospect doesn't have any pain that aligns with what you do. And if that's the case, then you politely thank them and wish them well, and you move on to the next one. I used to spend a lot of time trying to tell them that they needed us when they didn't, right? So for me, I think that has been a big part of the education, is just find that alignment to what you're capable of doing, and map it out on how it addresses somebody's pain. And of course, I think the other part that's important is you got to have some passion around it, right? You got to be interested in it, right? People can feel if that's something that fuels you. And if it doesn't, if that's artificial, people pick up on that. So I think there's got to be an authenticity to it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, let me give you an example. Like in the past, I used to do many different types of businesses. For example, I did I know, are you familiar from, well, now it's popularized, but no code tools. I wanted to create a no code marketplace for people to go on there to find people that can build that stuff out for you. Like they got chat, like for ChatGPT, all that stuff.
Yeah.
The issue was I was able to find the freelancers, but I couldn't convince nobody, no business owners like yourself, to use it because they didn't even know what the hell that was. I mean, they didn't know what that was. So
yeah.
So
well, sometimes that's another challenge, is sometimes people don't even know the problem they have, and you have to help them discover their own pain. So here's the analogy that I often use is, let's say I'm a doctor and somebody comes in to get their annual physical, right? I'm not going to just look at them without examining them and declare what ailment they have, right? I'm going to start doing diagnostic tests. I'm going to take their blood pressure. I'm going to listen to their heart. I'm going to maybe draw some blood and do some tests there. I'm going to start, probing around. I might start pushing and say, hey, tell me if it hurts anywhere I'm pressing. And as I'm doing that, then all of a sudden the patient's like, oh, ow, hey, that hurts when you push on my shoulder. I didn't even know I had pain there. But because I'm the doctor and I know where to press, I know where to probe for that pain, I can help the client discover pain they didn't know they had. So now we can talk about the solution to that shoulder pain. But if I just walked in without doing any probing for that pain and started saying, okay, you need physical therapy, you need to start taking this medication, without doing any of the pain discovery, they didn't even know they had that pain. They would have thought I was crazy. They wouldn't have listened to a thing I was saying. I think that's the same thing around business, right? I mean, if that marketplace, for example, you're talking about, I am absolutely sure you were onto something. I'm sure there were businesses that had pain in that area, but maybe they just didn't know it yet, right?
Wow.
So then how do you connect the dots for them? How do you, and the challenge there is, you got to get in front of them, right? You have to have enough credibility for them to listen to you. And that's a challenge sometimes unto itself is, we're all getting bombarded with people trying to sell us something every day, right? What would cause somebody to listen to you versus somebody else, right? So, now we get into the whole marketing aspect and it's a much bigger conversation, but I think you start with how do you map the pain to the solution and how do you help them discover it?
Okay, I understand that. That's a good analogy. I just want to get to some of the people. And again, if you're watching on live on YouTube or LinkedIn, make sure you just say hello, drop in a question, and just let us know you're there so we can know. And also like and subscribe. So we got a couple comments. Shade Roberts, we answered this already, but thank you for Shade for answering this, reaching out and answering a question. We got Jameson Glover. He said, hello all. Hello, Jameson. How you doing, brother?
Hello.
Yeah, we got Shade Roberts with a quick question. Is it possible to start a tech business from scratch with no money? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on the business, of course, but if it's a services-based business, then I think absolutely. I mean, the reality is, I started this business with $500, and that $500 went to go buy a computer I could do my work on. Now, if I'd already had a computer, I wouldn't have had to spend that money. But we started this business with very, very little investment, and I think that's one of the things that's nice about service businesses, right? If we were starting a business making widgets of some sort and we needed machinery to do that, you've got to have a little bit of money to go out and buy that machinery. But a service-based business is really easy to start. And so I think the idea is if there's a service, especially in technology, that you can deliver to people, at that point it's mostly your time, right? And I don't think you need to make a huge investment. Now, does the money help? Sure, right? It helps you get some maybe research and development done. It helps you move a little faster, maybe gets you some advertising and sales momentum, right? But you don't need it, right? You just need that determination. You need that grit.
Okay, that's a good answer. And thank you, Shade Roberts, for that question.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to ask you another question that kind of pertains to a lot of people that a lot of people think you're going to have everything figured out. For example, I've been trying to do. I was always a person. I was 20 years old, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna just start this business when I'm 30. I'm gonna be a millionaire, or I'm gonna just be like, well, I'm gonna be 20. Well, I can just start at any time, be 23 with a millionaire. But the thing that I've learned is you're never going to have it figured out. But I mean, what's your thoughts on entrepreneurs or people that's in the tech industry that want to, charge for their services, but they always think, well, it's not the right time. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying. So a friend of mine gave me some wonderful advice years ago, and you can certainly apply it to starting a business. But he said, if you wait to have children until you're ready, you're never going to have children because you're never ready for it, right? And for those of you who have kids, you totally get that. I think the same thing with business, because there's not an entrepreneur out there that was ready for everything that running a business is going to throw at you. There's not an entrepreneur out there that knew everything that you need to know to run a business. Some of it you just have to live through and gain that experience and do it. And frankly, the sooner you do it, the sooner you gain that experience. And I think now with a lot of the advancements we're seeing in the technology space, especially around AI, we see that things are moving at such a more rapid pace. If you've got a good idea, you've got to jump on it. You've got to seize that opportunity because the conditions might not be the same 6 months, a year from now, right? If you see an opportunity, you got to go for it. And, now don't be reckless, of course, right? I mean, you got to still, put food on the table, have a place to live. You got to do all those things, right? But find a way to make it happen. And there's a famous saying, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it goes something to the effect of "Don't put off till tomorrow what can be done today." And I thoroughly believe in that.
Yeah, make sure that y'all listening to that. That was a lot of good knowledge. Jay Mellon has a very big company at AtNetPlus that does a lot of cybersecurity consulting, technology. So just make sure you listen to that. Just go forward on that move to move forward with your business. Another question I wanted to get into with yourself. I know that you have AtNetPlus. I know you have these locations, you have employees and things like that. But how did you get your first client without no brand? And especially back then,
Yeah.
like how would you encourage somebody to do that?
Yeah, it's daunting, right? It's a little
Yeah.
intimidating to do that. What we did is we recognized that we had a network of people that we knew, people that trusted us. People do business with people they know, like, and trust, right? I heard that from a friend of mine years ago, and I agree with it. And so the idea is, okay, who knows us, right? And then out of those people that knows us, who likes us? Hopefully, there's some of them that like us. And then, who have we developed trust with? And with those people, you just start letting them know what you're doing. And, I think when you start a business, a lot of people, you know, they want to root for you. They're excited for you. They want to see people succeed, right? Especially the people that you should be surrounding yourself with. And so when they see that, if there's a way that they can help, they will. So what we would do is literally we would go to local chamber of commerce networking events. I mean, we would just basically go to anywhere where business people were and tell our story, right? And more often than not, the person we were in front of didn't have a need for our services, but a lot of times they knew somebody that did, right? And so the key is you just start telling your story over and over and over again. And the other thing I learned years ago from a mentor was about the time you're tired of telling the story, other people are just picking up on it, right? You think, like, I've been saying this same thing for so long and nobody's listening. You got to keep saying it, right? Because it takes time for people to clue into it, right? You just got to keep doing, and eventually you build that momentum. But it's hard. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I would tell you the same thing. Like, for example, like when I first started this podcast, I wanted to hear everybody else's story. But a lot of people kept asking me, what is Chris, what is your story? So, and then also more
Yeah.
recently, I've been getting some mentorship at church. Shout out to Deacon Reno. He said something about what is your testimony? So,
Yeah.
like, meaning like there was a book he told me to read. And basically the way he brought it up to me, the whole book that he sent me to read about leadership was basically the guy's testimony in a way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you got to have your testimony, because story building is help, it can help you get your client. And then
Yeah.
your people around you can help get you where you need to go.
Well, what I love about that story that you share is it aligns very much with what you read in a lot of straight up business books about when they talk about what's your mission and vision, right? When you say, what's your testimony? To me, that aligns to, an organization's mission and vision, which really comes from the founder, right? Like, why are you doing what you're doing, right? What is it that you're doing? How are you doing it? Identify who you are, develop your business identity, and then share that with everybody. And it's not going to fit for everybody, right? There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, that's great, but it's not for me. But there's going to be people out there that resonates with. You just got to find them.
Yeah, and that's what, like, and that's why when people, when it comes to content, they like, man, I don't care. Like, I'm not a content person. I'm not gonna. Somebody gonna relate to you. All you need is 100 people to relate
And
to
there's a
you.
lot of people out there. There's billions. You got to
Yeah.
find just a few.
Yeah. Now, so for the audience that's watching, man, Jay's giving a lot of good game. So make sure that if you have any comments, make sure you're putting some comments down and on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and also make sure you're liking the video. We're gonna keep going, but just make sure you ask questions, because we might not get this opportunity again. So just make sure you're asking, especially from somebody that's in entrepreneurship, that's done what you're trying, just doing what you're trying to do. So. Okay, so Jay, I know we kind of hinted at it earlier in the interview. Like, what are the best tech skills that you can probably monetize, especially in the business space or B2B space, like currently, from your
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, if we're talking about specific skill sets, cybersecurity has been hot for a long time. As I said earlier, especially in the MSP space, it's really evolved into a risk management business. So, if you've got knowledge specifically around, security process, documentation, regulatory alignment, those skills are still very much in demand. And again, you don't need to go buy something to develop that skill set. You need to put in the time, you need to put in the effort, right? But there's nothing stopping anybody from gaining that skill set. You just have to put in the work. And then of course, AI is everywhere. I can't have a conversation with a prospect or a client and AI doesn't come up. It comes up all the time. And so I think the challenge with AI is it's such a broad topic. Where do you kind of anchor yourself to that makes you kind of stand out? And I think when I think about business and AI, there's a couple things that stand out. First of all, a lot of businesses understand the impact that AI can have in the business, but they don't really know how to leverage it. They don't know how to take the fun experiments that they're doing and actually turn it into business value, right? So if you can develop skill sets around process, right? And because if you think about it, everything in IT is just simply a business process that's been automated, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. So if you break it down into its lowest components, figure out how to work processes, figure out how to optimize them, figure out how to do that with some of this new technology around AI. And there's businesses out there that are hungry for that knowledge. There's a lot of opportunity around policy, data governance. A lot of companies are starting to recognize that they want to move fast on AI, but they've got to do it responsibly. They've got to do it safe. The OpenClaw stuff opened a lot of people's eyes, and that is
Yeah.
incredibly powerful, very, very cool, very
Dangerous.
very dangerous. But it can be done safely, right? And our perspective for our clients is we want to be an enabler. We don't want to be a roadblock, right? So as much as we have caution around tools like that, we need to find ways to help our clients leverage it, right? And there's ways to do it safely. So if you can have skill set around that, I think that's valuable. I think the other area that really kind of is a nice intersection between cybersecurity and AI is this concept of shadow AI. If you're not familiar with that term, it's related to another term in IT called shadow IT. If you're not familiar with what shadow IT is basically where end users, in an effort to just get their job done, sometimes will go out and source their own technology. And they just don't know any better, right? So here's the analogy I often use. Let's say you're a business that uses Microsoft SharePoint, Microsoft OneDrive for your documents, right? And because of regulatory requirements, you have to restrict access to all those documents to only the United States. Nobody can access those documents from outside of the United States. That's practical. That makes sense. That happens a lot. Now you have an employee who is going on vacation to Paris for 2 weeks, and they're really excited, but they know that there's a project they need to work on, there's a document they need to work on, and they know that their SharePoint instance won't let them access those documents from outside the United States, but they need to get that job done. So they think to themselves, well, I'm a motivated creative person, I'm just going to sign up for a free Dropbox account, and I'm going to put that file there, and I'll be able to access it from France because it doesn't have those restrictions. But you know what? I'm not exactly sure which file I need. So guess what? I'm just going to copy everything I have access to up to there. I'll sort that out later. And IT business leadership has no visibility to that, right? So now you have a good amount of your company's data out there in a platform that was unapproved, probably without MFA, probably without good password policies, certainly without the geo restrictions that are required, probably not satisfying most of the regulatory requirements that you have to as a business, and you don't even know about it. That's shadow IT, right? Well, shadow AI is the same idea, just with AI, and here's where I think it's even more impactful. With shadow IT, people aren't trying to be deceitful. They're just, honestly, in most cases, just trying to get their job done, and they're not really trying to hide it. They're just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
With shadow AI, we're seeing it a little bit differently. We are seeing people actively try to hide it. Again, not because they're trying to be really devious, but there's fear involved. People are scared that if their boss knows that they're using AI on a particular project, could their job be at risk? Could their boss end up giving them more work? I mean, there's a lot of valid fears that people have around maybe their boss even knowing they're using AI, especially if it's the company policy that they're not ready yet, right? And so now you've got people that are engaging with LLMs out there that have not been vetted by the company, do not have the controls in place, right? What happens when that LLM is owned by a nation state that is not the United States, that right in their terms and conditions says, anything you upload to our platform, we're free to use however we want.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your employee uploads trade secrets, uploads maybe, company IP, or even worse, what if it's client IP and that gets uploaded and then now it's out there, you can't get it back, right? So there's a lot of opportunity if you're in the cyberspace world, cybersecurity world, to take those skills and apply them to shadow AI and help companies secure it, channel all of that energy through a good avenue. There's ways to do it safely, and make sure that they don't put their companies at risk unknowingly.
Yeah, I learned something new myself. I never heard of shadow AI or anything like that. But to the audience watching, like these are some of the things that you can use to monetize or take advantage of. And again, we may not have these opportunities again for a long, long time outside of quantum computing. And so I would take advantage of that. That's a good way you can monetize. And Jay, thank you. We got some questions actually. We got a couple questions we're gonna go into, and I'm going to make sure we get back to the main questions too. And thank you, Jay, for coming on and just dropping these gems.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. So Shade Roberts said, "What did you do as a leader to make sure your company didn't just survive but lasted 30 years?" I mean, as a leader, that's a good question. What did you do?
I made a lot of mistakes,
Okay.
and unfortunately, none of them were big enough to kill us, but a couple got pretty close. And so the key is not only that you make the mistakes, you don't want to make the mistakes, but the key is, do you learn from those mistakes, and then do you adapt and not make the same mistake again? And I'll tell you, one of the big mistakes we made years ago that we learned a hard lesson from is about keeping an eye on the company culture. As we were growing, adding people to the business, the more people you add to the business, the more different personalities that you want different personalities, you want different perspectives. But it can also, cause changes in the company that you don't always see right away. And unfortunately, we had some changes in the company that had a negative impact on culture, and it got really, really bad. And it got so bad that we started losing good people. And then as a result, we started losing good clients. And it got really dark. It was not a fun time to come to work. And it almost killed us. Luckily, we recognized it. We got a hold of it. We got the culture corrected. Fortunately, we've got a really strong culture now, but it is always a work in progress, right? You got to stay on top of it. And I wouldn't have thought it then, but absolutely now I believe it is. We're better off now for having gone through that, right? At the time, there's no way I would have believed it. It was horrible. We didn't think we were going to survive. I'm glad we did it now, because now we respect culture. So I think my point is, when you mess up, pay attention, right? Figure out where the mistake happened and then fix it.
Okay. So you wouldn't really call that really mistakes. It was just learning lessons.
So I have an acronym I love called FAIL, FAIL, and it stands for First Attempt in Learning. I love it, because when you fail, not that you're setting out to fail, but when you fail, if you take a look at it as a first attempt in learning, that failure can actually be more valuable than some successes in some cases.
Yeah, that's a bar. That is a bar. We're gonna go to the next comment. Appreciate you. So the next comment is Upper Echelon One said, "Shout out to Northeast Ohio." So
absolutely,
yeah.
Northeast Ohio all the way.
Yeah, shout out. We have a question from Wally. Hello, the market is very competitive now. If someone starts a business from scratch with no prior knowledge, how can they compete? And what type of IT business would you suggest for a beginner who wants to enter such a competitive market?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's hard to answer. What I would say is, the challenge, like you have in a lot of careers, is people want to hire people with experience, but if you don't get hired, how do you get the experience, right? And so the same thing is when you're starting a business, right? And what I would probably do is, network, get to know people. As I said before, identify who you are, identify the problem that you're solving, and just be relentless in getting out in the community and talking to people about it. And there's going to be people who are going to be willing to roll the dice and take a chance on you. Maybe it's because they think they can save a couple bucks because you might be a little hungrier, and I get that. I would caution, don't chase the bottom, price too much, right? But maybe if they save a couple bucks, they might be more willing to go with you. But more importantly, there's people who want to root for the underdog, and there's people that if you can demonstrate to them that you've done the hard work, you have the knowledge, you've got a solution to their problem, they're willing to take that chance on you. You just got to find them. They're out there. So you got to get out there and hustle and get in front of people and just talk.
Okay.
I know, and it's not simple, but I think that's all you can do, really.
That's all you can really do. And thank you,
Yeah.
Wally, for the question. Just want to shout out to anybody that's watching the live stream. If you have any comments, make sure you put in the comments below, or if they're on YouTube or LinkedIn. Again, Jay is giving a lot of gems. He's giving us an hour of his time. So I just want to make sure that y'all asking questions, and make sure that you're liking on both LinkedIn and YouTube and sharing it so it can get to other people. Okay, so Jay, what is another question I want to ask, because I know you've been in this for 30 plus years. What is the biggest mistakes that you've seen with small businesses that start a business, and sometimes it can lead to failure? Like, what are some of the mistakes that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, this is what's crazy is for anybody that reads business books, all I am is a walking, talking cliche of business book quotes, right? Um, but honestly, I do attribute that to a big part of our ability to survive is continually learning, and I think one of the things I learned is I think is from the business book uh, uh, the E-Myth Revisited, and it's a saying that a lot of you may have already heard is, be careful to work on the business, not in the business, right? And what that means is whatever your business is, whatever services, again, if let's say you're providing cybersecurity services, certainly working in the business, providing those cybersecurity services is something you have to do, especially if you're solo to start out, right? Somebody's got to do that work, right? So I'm not saying don't do that work, but as you're doing that work, don't forget to work on the business, right? And what does that mean? It means identify who you are as a business, identify your identity, identify your unique value proposition to your target market, identify who your target market is. Where do people that will buy your services congregate? Do that work, develop a story, and get out there and tell that story. That's working on the business, right? Providing structure, making sure that you're incorporated, making sure you file your taxes on time, all of those things that aren't fun that you still have to do to run the business. So many times people overlook that, right? So it's the work on your business in addition to in it.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and and just keep citing those books, because I know it's a lot of. I'm a reader, just need some more books. So put any quotes you need to put.
Yeah.
So Jay, so a lot of business owners, like they're trying to, sometimes you don't have the budget to hire people,
Right.
um or they're trying to start hiring people, they don't know how to hire people. What guidance would you give for somebody that's just trying to make one hire, and then also say if you're trying to hire multiple people, like what would you do for somebody that's growing their business and they want to hire people?
Yeah. Hiring is also hard. It sounds like everything in business is hard. That might be the case. It is hard, and hiring is as well. The challenge with hiring people is the person you meet in the interview, that's their representative, right? You don't meet the real person until a couple weeks in, right? So how do you kind of see through that? How do you kind of get to know who that real person is? And that's hard sometimes. I think one of the things that's really worked well for us is again, I'm saying it over and over, we leverage our network. The best hires we've had have been through people we know. And so, for example, if you're looking, and we'll just keep focusing on the cybersecurity angle, let's say you're a cybersecurity business and maybe you're offering penetration testing as an example, and you need somebody to run your pen tests. Start with your family and your friends and put out the word, hey, do you know anybody that knows how to do pen tests? And maybe not, maybe people don't, but you never know, right? And sometimes you go 2 or 3 layers deep and you might find them. The other thing is, if you're on LinkedIn, don't be afraid to leverage the LinkedIn network, right? If you can find somebody that's 1 or 2, 2 or 3 degrees removed from you, ask for an introduction, get in front of them, find people with that skill set, because I think ultimately the people tend to congregate with people who share their same values. So people in your network likely think similarly to you, right, in some capacity, and the people they associate with probably do too. There's probably some sort of value alignment there, right? So I think that's the place I would start. And then the other thing I'll say is, if you're hiring for a key position, it's important for somebody to have experience and knowledge, but it's also important for you to have a plan. And where I'm going with that is I've hired really smart people who have a lot of really great experience, and plugged them into the company and just said, go do your thing, with no direction, no guidance, no vision. And in almost every one of those cases, that person failed, but not because of them. They failed because of me, because I didn't give them the direction and the guidance. So I think that's the other part of it, is when you do have that employee, make sure that you give them the structure that they need, hold their hand, get them up to speed. It's your business, it's your vision. They're going to need to do it the way you need it done, and the only way they're going to do that is through your guidance.
Yeah, and I get that too. Like when I did work with certain people, like say for example, video work or editing or things like that, they're fire editors. They can make something look really good, but it has to look a certain way to get to the right audience. So I have to explain to them, or hey, this is what's going to work for the audience. Or if I'm interviewing, like I'm trying to interview certain people, sometimes they have a different vision in their head about like maybe okay, this is how I want the interview to go, but I'm like, no, if we go that route, it's not gonna get the expectation that you wanted. So you got to give them a plan so they can react. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's your show. You got to be the boss.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So now this is some good guidance, man. This is good. The last question again, Jay is giving us an hour's time. We're getting close to the last little bit, and I know. So remember, everybody, we're getting towards the end. So just make sure if you have any questions, make sure you ask questions. Make sure you like, make sure you share, and also just drop in, just say hello or thank you for the information or whatever. And he is giving us our time, so just make sure we're getting close to the end. So Jay, again, we have all that stuff in place. We kind of went through everything you need for a business. Now, how do you scale?
Yeah. Every business is a little different, right? Even in a technology business, people are key, right? You've got to have people that, as I said before, when you hire somebody and put them in a role, you got to give them direction, you got to give them your vision, you got to give them their guidance. But then once you get up to speed, you got to get out of their way, right? The idea behind hiring somebody is to free you up to do other things, right? Well, if once you get them up to speed, again, at the beginning, you got to hold their hand, but once you get them up to speed, if you're still micromanaging, getting all up in their business all the time and directing every action they do, that's never going to free up your time. And I get it. Sometimes if you ask somebody to do something, if they don't do it exactly the way you would do it, it doesn't feel like it's done right. Let go of that, right? I've had to let go of that and recognize that people are different. People do things different ways. There's not one way to do anything. And if the end result is what you need, does it really matter how they got there, as long as they, stick to your values and so on. And so, get those people in place and let them do their thing, right? And just don't get in their way. Because then what that does is frees you up to do other things. So, I have a saying I like to share with people when people, I meet new people and they ask, what do you do for a living? My response is, my job is to figure out how to get other people to do my job. I mean, I identify something that needs to be done, I figure it out, and then I hand it off to somebody else. And that frees me up to figure out the next thing, right?
Okay, that's a good word to thumb, even for myself. Like, eventually, I'm not. I always tell people with Tech Woke, I'm eventually. I can't be the host forever, man. So, I'm gonna get somebody else to take it over at some point. So,
Right. But it'll still be your vision.
It's still the vision, but
Yep.
I free up the time. I don't have to be in every episode. So that's good because I know so many entrepreneurs at just starting off and they just want to do everything, but it can't be done. Like you said, you got to allow the person to do their job.
The other thing too is be selective in what you do. It's okay to say no sometimes. It is shocking how much time we spend in a day doing things that really don't matter.
Yeah.
So I have a short story that I'll share that I think really drives that home. Is and this might just be nothing more than a story, maybe not real, but the story goes, there was a journalist near the end of World War II that was interviewing one of the generals on the U.S. side for the war. And it was near the end of the day, and they were wrapping up their interview. And this was back in the day when you still had physical inboxes and outboxes on people's desks with paper in them. And as they're wrapping up the interview, they stand up, shake hands, and as they're getting ready to walk out of the general's office, he walks over to the inbox, grabs a giant stack of papers, and without looking at a single one, moves it to the outbox, and then continues to walk out of his office. And so the journalist stops him and says, "Hey, I couldn't help but notice you didn't even look at a single thing, and now it's in the outbox, it's going to go out. What's that all about?" And the general looks at him and says, "You know what? You'd be surprised at how little of it ever comes back." Now, you got to be careful there, right? That doesn't mean be reckless. It doesn't mean that you ignore stuff, right? That's not at all the point of the story. But it means that how much time are we spending every day working on things that maybe don't matter, right? And how can we be really selective and spend our time on only the things that really do matter? And it's okay sometimes to say no.
Yeah, because even with myself, it's like I'm thinking I had a lot of things to do with my business, right? For example, but really, if I really think about it, I can get it done in 2 to 3 hours or less, and then I'm pretty much free to work on other things, studying things like that. So I've been doing that too, with tracking my time and creating schedules.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yes. So
absolutely.
we have a question from Shade Roberts. She had a question. She said, "How do you balance being a CEO and family time?"
Yeah, that's challenging because my wife is also a CEO, and
Oh,
so
okay.
she's got her own responsibilities. So it's doubly challenging because it's not like I can just, you know, uh, ask her to carry an unfair share of the family load. So it's challenging. We've got 4 kids, and they take up a lot of time. I think for us the key is we weren't afraid to ask for help, right? We get help from family. We're fortunate that we were able to get a nanny involved, which takes a big load off. But then the other part of it is, because I have an amazing leadership team that I trust, and frankly are better at doing everything they do better than I would do, and I can just get out of their way. That frees me up then to go on a vacation and not have to worry about checking into the business. It frees me up to take my weekends and decompress. It frees me up to make sure that I have dinner time with the family uninterrupted, because I can trust those people are doing what they need to do, right? And it's a balance, right? They need their time with their family as well. So we trade off, we share, we both carry different loads. So it's a challenge though. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's a good thing you said. Like, again, they have their free time too. They need the free time, but for you to have a business and you can take a week off if you need it and come back and it's still functioning, that's really good. So and I don't hear that too many times. So that's good. And thank you, Shade, for that's a very good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jay, we're getting towards the end. I just want to ask you a couple more questions. Like, where can the audience find you?
Yeah, so obviously, in addition to in Northeast Ohio, online we are found at atnetplus.com, spelled AtNetPlus.com. And like many companies, we're active on LinkedIn, on X, on YouTube. We have a lot of content out there. We have a newsletter that we send out. We like to present ideas as thought leaders in the managed IT space. So we have a newsletter that goes out every month. And then we participate in a lot of speaking events around the area. For those of you in Northeast Ohio, maybe I'll see you around at one of the local events.
Yeah, most definitely. Make sure you just check out Jay Mellon. Check out his business at atnetplus.com. Make sure you join his newsletter, and make sure you're checking out if you need cybersecurity services, IT services, or tech or anything. Just make sure you reach out to him or his business to make sure that they can take care of that. Okay. Also to Jay, what is one quote? It could be a sentence, a quote. What is one thing you just want to leave with the audience?
Yeah. Again, so I think I shared with you before the recording. My father's an entrepreneur, and I grew up watching him start multiple businesses and have a lot of successes of his own. And I remember growing up, there was a sign on the wall in his office hanging above his desk, and it said, "He who wants to do something finds a way. He who doesn't finds an excuse." And that stuck with me my whole life. And I now have a version of that plaque hanging on the wall in my office as a reminder that, anytime I'm trying to kind of like wiggle out of something, it's because I'm finding an excuse. There's a way. So.
Yeah. So, and as to the audience, like whether you're trying to get into tech, start a business, is always a way. And if you're really trying to do it, you'll find the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's a good
Agreed.
quote, Jay. So remember everybody, check out Jay and Jay again. Thank you for giving me some time, especially in the afternoon. You can be doing anything, but I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation, and congratulations on the success you've had. You got a great operation here. So congrats on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I take very much pride in that. Just want to make sure we got the best of the best. So for you to say that after all the things you told me you do, that's a good accomplishment. And I got it on video too.
Yep. You should be proud of. You should be proud of what you've done.
Yeah. So for everybody that's watching, if you're watching on YouTube, on LinkedIn, remember, like the video. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out rmfacademy.io if you're trying to learn about compliance. Government agencies is trying to get cybersecurity training and compliance. So just make sure you check out RMF Academy. We have a cohort coming at the end of the month on the 27th. So remember everybody, get 1% better every day. Peace out, everybody. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.